Chapter 11, The Civil War. Please be a note-taking study guide, page 173. The question is, what did each side in the Civil War think they would win the war easily? So both sides, the South and the North, thought it's going to be a quick war, it's going to be done. And the reason is because they had both strengths and they had weaknesses. So the North. How did two border states bolster Northern confidence? Kentucky and Delaware, even though they were slave states, they supported the Union. The Virginia event helped the North. The West colonies of Virginia refused to secede, and actually that's when West Virginia became a state. So they joined the Union. What four things did the North have? Much more than the South had. They had factories, many manufacturing factories. They had railroad track. They had farmland, and they had much more people. So for the army to fight. The three parts of the Northern strategy was called the Anaconda Plan. One was to blockade southern seaports. The second part was to cut the South in two by gaining control of the Mississippi River. And the third was to invade Virginia and seize Richmond. That was the strategy. Who was the Union general in the first Battle of Bull Run? This is kind of the first major war of the Civil War. It was Irving McDowell, and he didn't actually last long. The South, how did two border states both bolster Southern confidence, I should say, not Northern confidence? Both Maryland and Mississippi supported the South in their secession, but the Northern troops were used to subdue those states, and they stayed with the Union even though troops had to go in and make sure that they did. The second, which generals left the U.S. Army to join the Confederate Army? Most of them did. Robert E. Lee, Joseph Johnson, Albert Johnson. These were all people part of the U.S. Army that were from Southern states, and they went and joined the Confederate Army. Two advantages they had. The South had were Confederates would be fighting their own territories, the defensive war, and the local people would help them. So they knew the lay of the land. The supply routes are right there, and so there's a boost to morale. Defense is always easier than offense in wars. And they would be led by the nation's best officers. All the people that, even the soldiers, from the soldiers up through the officers, they all had been Southerners, and they experienced war in the Mexican-American War. The people in the North didn't actually fight in that war. Most of them were Southerners. What was the South strategy? Two things. Defend its land until the North got tired of fighting, and they wanted to seek European nations, aid from European nations. They had very close ties with Europe because of cotton, and the North didn't have as close ties. So those were their two things. Why the South was hoping that Britain would support it? At this time, at the beginning of the Civil War, Britain was a major trading partner, and the South was their major source of cotton for Britain. By the end of the war, that had changed, but in the beginning, the South thought, we have so close economic ties with Britain, we're going to get their support, even though Britain had already abolished slavery by this time. Hardships both sides faced. American families, it broke them apart. During the Civil War, brother fought against brother, father against father. Families fought against each other. They were split. The camp conditions for soldiers, miserable, diseased. There's a lack of clean water. And actually, more people died from diseases in the Civil War than they died from actual fighting. And the conditions of prisoners of war in the South and North, overcrowded prison camps. There were food shortages. It was not a good place to be a prisoner of war. There was a very, very high death rate. Once you became a prisoner of war, it was a very high death rate from disease, from starvation, from lack of water, and things like that.